views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to writers, reporters, editors, and sometimes photographers and filmmakers. And in this case, on our second segment, we're going to talk to a Bronx author who you know from many other activities, but we'll keep that in suspense until we get there. We're going to start out with the reporter who covers the Bronx for the city. We're so pleased to welcome back Claudia Irizarry Aponte to the program. Nice to have you with us, Claudia.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations. I just read on your credits that you were a recipient of the Sidney Hillman Foundation Award for Social Justice Reporting. That's always a good sign for somebody covering the Bronx. We appreciate it. So anyway, let's get right to it. You and Greg Smith, also a writer at, let's give him credit where credit is due, a writer for the city, I thought did a very interesting piece that I had not seen, indicating that the former borough president, Ruben Diaz Jr., is lobbying for Bronx waterfront development that he supported as borough president, which creates an interesting dynamic. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about exactly what you reported and what the story is really about?
So for sure. So Ruben Diaz Jr., the former borough president, was term limited out of office in January of this year. And now, as has been widely reported, he works in the private sector. He has his own lobbying firm that he registered in April of last year, Liberal Diaz and Associates. And he also does work as an executive at Montefiore. Last week, it announced that he was going to come on as an advisor for a new PR firm. So he's making moves in the private sector. And of course, with lobbying, what Greg and I found is that the former borough president is the a lobbyist for a project that is brewing on the Bronx waterfront called Fordham Landing. This is an enormous project for the neighborhood. This is a stretch of land that straddles the University Heights Bridge, of course, on the Bronx side, extending all the way pretty close to the Target and Marble Hill, all the way down just below.
You can see it right there. There's the 207th Street Bridge, and that whole parcel of land, I guess, surrounded in blue, is that's a large spot, and there's nothing there right now, essentially.
It's enormous. At 40 acres, it would be much larger than Hudson Yards even. Proposed for that area is mixed use development for housing, a music venue, a school, an esplanade to give folks in the neighborhood waterfront access. It's a huge, enormous project. And the former borough president is getting paid $20,000 a month to lobby for it. Now, he was also lobbyist for this same developer, also sought his ear on this project in his final months of borough president, according to public records.
You reported that they had a meeting, at least one meeting.
Right. So according to the public records, it's not clear exactly whether they met, but the one of the executives of this development company, Brad Zackford, he did say, he did tell the Norwood News in November that he met personally with Ruben Diaz and his staff to talk about this project. So that's where the conflict of interest component comes in. While we don't know the extent of those conversations and what was promised and not promised and the nature of those conversations or where they even happened, the fact of the matter is that, this puts the borough president pretty close at violating conflicts of interest laws. Right now we don't know, the Conflicts of Interest Board keeps their investigations pretty tight-lipped. We really won't know whether or not they're even looking into this until after they reach a decision, if they actually do find any sort of wrongdoing here. But it really just does raise questions about, the former borough president's dealings in the private sector and the fact that he, is working on this massive project that lobbyists and developers sought his ear on while he was serving as borough president. And we can also talk about, when he, as borough president for many, many years, he talked about developing that area. He didn't talk specifically about, let's use this developer, let's create mixed income housing, but he did say in various speeches in 2015 and 2017, I would like to see this area of the Bronx developed. I would like to see something similar to what we see in the west side of Manhattan. So this is certainly something that was on his mind for many years, serving as borough president.
And then it's right, and then the questions are, did he use that office to basically land a job? And we'll let the Conflict of Interest Board, deal with that, and certainly we wouldn't judge it here. What I think we should clarify for viewers, as I understand the law, you have to wait 1 year because, of course, once you leave office, you're a private citizen, you can do what you want, except you have to wait 1 year from getting to prohibit you from getting income from something you worked on while in elective office or while in public office. This applies to all employees. I can just tell you, ironically, that same parcel of land was one of the choices of where the city wanted to consider building a water filtration plant that they ultimately built in, Marshall Lew and Van Cortlandt Park.
Mm.
And the DEP commissioner at the time, Chris Ward, got a job in Brooklyn and waited 1 year, exactly 1 year, almost to the day that he left the DEP, and got a job as the executive director of the Construction Trades Union. And so it was clear that he skirted the rules, so to speak, but he waited the year. In this case, it doesn't appear that the former borough president waited a year. I have that right?
Yeah, that is correct. And also, it should bear noting that according to the state registration, lobbying registration records, he's listed as lobbying or being paid to lobby before DOT, that's the City Department of Transportation, and HPD, the City Department of Housing Preservation and Development, not the borough president's office. So the other thing that the law states, the rules are kind of, they're in
Now
legalese,
that's interesting.
but in layman's terms, he's forbidden for I believe forever for lobbying before the borough president and her staff because he served as borough president.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting.
but he's free after that period that you described to lobby any other city agency. But yes, and
Wow.
then the other wrinkle here is that his lobbying firm Ruben Diaz and Associates, he was listed as registering that in April 2021 when he still had 9 months left to serve in
As borough president.
and he
Wow.
registered in Albany, not in the Bronx. So clearly, while he was still borough president and still had 9 months left to serve, he was already making moves to become a lobbyist as soon as he left office.
As soon as he left office. Well, it's a fascinating story, and as I said, we can't judge it. That will be judged by officials at the Conflict of Interest Board. One thing I do want to mention, and you did cover extensively in the article, was regardless of who's doing it, what is going to be there. And I know, as any new development in the Bronx, the desire for housing that is actually affordable is a major question. And you talk to some of the elected officials who didn't really comment on the former borough president, but talked about what they want to see there. Why don't you relate to us a little bit about what they said? The article is in the city, by the way, folks. Okay.
So the one important thing to note here is that this project is still years away from breaking ground. A project of this, if it ever does, a project of this scale usually takes many, many, many long years. Hudson Yards, again, a project that is comparable in scale, took 10, 12 years to finally open to the public and to break ground and all of these things. It's a very lengthy process. And Fordham Landing, should it ever come to light, won't even begin the public review process known as ULURP, Universal Land Use Procedure, until at least at the soonest 2023. So we're still very far away from ever seeing this project come to light, if it comes to that, or breaking ground. But what's being proposed for these 40 acres of land is, mixed income housing. There have already been, the developer has already submitted permits to start building apartment buildings just south of the bridge. I believe the address is 320 West Fordham Road. Have also
Mhm.
held permits for
Which is
another
just excuse me, which is just north of where that parcel of land is.
just south.
South, excuse me, that's right. I'm looking at it from here. Yes, south of
Yeah.
where that land is,
Yeah,
closer to the 207th Street Bridge.
it's the southernmost tip of the entire project, and then there's another apartment building that's being proposed closer to where the target is, so in the northern portion of the project. And so overall, this project is going to include, many thousands of units of apartment units, 30% of them, which the developer has said so far they intend to maintain affordable. Of course, these conversations are all very fraught. Already, some elected officials and other leaders have talked about, well, affordable for whom? There is no neighborhood plan yet.
You know that dialogue is going to happen. That's for sure.
But there is, just to have a sense of just how early and how premature these conversations are. We still don't have a neighborhood plan. We still don't have an environmental
Yeah,
review.
this was all dialogue, and you guys brought it to light because of the potential for conflict with the borough president. I didn't ask you; it is not in the article. You tried to reach out to the former borough president, didn't get a statement or anything like that.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And so, what's interesting about that parcel of land as you go south, of course, there's Roberto Clemente houses that was built on, a little further south. And then now, very far south, I think it's called Bronx Point. And that I think is being seen as a favorable project. It's going to house the Hip Hop Museum. And then further south is another somewhat controversial project because that's the Brookfield project that originally was owned by Keith Rubenstein and is seen by many as a gentrifying project. So it just as the desire to, I guess what I'm getting at, the desire to develop the Harlem River has had mixed results. It would be interesting to see how this one turns out, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's the same community board, also CB7, that is also legislating over the Kingsbridge Armory project. It's
Yes.
all in the same area.
We're actually going to bring those topics up with our next guest. How ironic, because she's written about development in the Bronx. So anyway, Claudia Irizarry Aponte, boy, do we thank you and Greg Smith for this article and, of course, all the great work that you do covering our borough of the Bronx with intelligence and responsibility and with insight. And we appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks again for having me.
All right, folks, check out The City and read everything Claudia writes because she's writing about us and our borough. We're going to take a break. Our guest will be Majora Carter, who is, for some, a controversial figure, for others, a hero for having really dealt with grassroots issues in developing our borough of the Bronx. She has a new book. We're going to talk about that right after this. Okay, back with you on the Bronx Buzz, and I am thrilled to see an old friend, and I mean old because I've known her for a long time. Let's see, I got a long list. She's a real estate developer, an urban revitalization strategy consultant, a MacArthur Fellow and Peabody Award-winning broadcaster, and now author. And this is her book, ladies and gentlemen. She could see it behind her, Reclaiming Your Community. It is Majora Carter. Nice to see you again, Majora.
Nice to see you, Gary.
Listen, we don't BS in the Bronx. We tell the truth. So I'm going to tell you, in anticipation of this, I said, I know what Majora advocates for. We've known each other for a very long time. And so it'd be interesting to read her book and, hear her talk about it. However, I was incredibly pleased to find a personal account, account of who you are, who you were, how growing up in Hunts Point and many of the issues that so many young people and have to deal with growing up in Hunts Point. And then, listen, again, I'm not going to mince words, the whole Fresh Direct controversy, people
Mhm.
who have said some things about you that you're not quite as sincere or caring as you probably feel you are. And it was all there, as well as the fact is the book isn't a scholarly work because it is in the curriculum classes at Notre Dame, University of New Orleans, and Lesley College. It should be at Lehman, at Fordham, at Hostos, at Bronx,
It
but
will be.
we'll do that anyway. Nice to have you with us. Tell me about reclaiming community, your community. Why did you do it?
I wrote it because, the part of me was, growing up in the South Bronx during the era of the burning Bronx, I was one of those kids, who was led to believe that you measure success by how far you get away from it. And I didn't see real value in my community because I mean that was sort of like the way we were taught. Like we were asked to participate in the brain drain from our own community. And as I grew up and got involved, in community development, it became really clear that we were actually being sort of tasked to believe that our communities didn't have value and thus we should leave so someone else can come in and do the development, someone else, so that would be defined more by the kind of external things that make our community, even the fact that poverty is considered a part of our culture, wherein there's like plenty of other things that are our culture, but we didn't seem as it seemed to me as though we were the actual folks that were doing much of the development. So I wrote this book, as a way to kind of support people in their thinking about how we can reclaim our own communities to develop them from the inside out, to show that there's opportunity here for us, the people who are born and raised in our own communities, to create the kind of neighborhoods that we don't have to move out of in order to live in a better one.
How did you go? And it is all documented very, very clearly and well in the book. How did you go from being the advocate who was one of the fiercest advocates, when you were part of the creation of Sustainable South Bronx, to somebody who said, well, now I even allow TV to call me a real estate developer? What is that transition? How did that work? And how is that the same person?
Well, you see, the interesting thing about the way the nonprofit industrial complex works, and I think which is honestly does have its roots in white supremacy. It kind of looks at communities like us, like ours, as there are very particular ways that people should be seen as authentic, right? So you come from a neighborhood like this, you're an activist, it's okay, but somebody else does the development. Somebody else is taking care of you
This is
because
the way it's always been. I mean, this is what we're talking about.
And yes, and so for me, so I feel like I have always been an advocate. I have always been an entrepreneur. I have always used all the skills that God gave me, in order to support my community. So for me, it was hardly, a really weird kind of transition to think that somehow or another, moving into the business world, with a real focus on how do we create the kind of neighborhoods and developments and projects within our community that we know people are leaving our community in order to experience, except do it here. And why are we not thinking about local ownership? Why are we not thinking about like people that look just like me being the agents of change in our own communities? Like it's cute when it's like, oh, if you only want to build a park, but God forbid you want to actually start a business.
Or
Like,
you want to own property or
yeah,
manage or develop
this is
property.
a
Um,
problem.
Give me the definition as you see it of self gentrification, because
Well,
the G. Well, let me do one more bit of introduction before I let you talk. The G word is a dirty word for many people in the Bronx, and they're saying, it'd be nice to have more wealth for all of us, but if more wealth comes in and we end up getting on the short end of the stick, they make money, they have nice places to live, and we don't. That's a problem. Self gentrification is what?
Well, before I go into that, I think it's important for viewers to know that the way that I see that there are only two kinds of developments in community real estate development that happens in communities like the South Bronx. There's a kind that I think more typically people think about, as displacement that leads to gentrification. And everybody knows, like, oh, there's a big developers, come in, they buy up all the property, and then they essentially, create a neighborhood that's not for us. Even though we know good and daggone well that people from our own neighborhoods actually go out of our neighborhood to go to the kind of places that are built in neighborhoods once they're quote unquote gentrified. And then there's the kind of what
Let's just insert hence boogie down grind. And many people, no, do I have that
oh,
wrong?
I mean, it's a locally owned coffee shop that
That's what I'm saying. But
right.
you got criticism because people said you're building the kind of thing that Bronx people won't want. Because
Which is
no?
the craziest thing that
Oh, okay. I thought you were looking at me but because that's how I understood what had
yeah,
the
well, listen,
dialogue that had gone on.
again, to some people, if they only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But again, if we want to go directly back to the roots of, the kind of conflict, which I think is where you're going,
Mhm.
you've got, so anyway, let me finish up with the
Yeah,
fact
go ahead. I'm sorry. I couldn't
poverty
resist.
level economic. So there's two kinds of real estate development in our communities. One, is gentrification displacement, which I already talked about. The other kind is poverty level economic maintenance, which is where you'll see things like more health clinics, very highly subsidized affordable housing that are done by developers, usually from outside of our communities, that
And
make
using public funds to make them work.
public funds and basically making enough money so that they could send their kids to great schools and live in great
Ugh,
neighborhoods. But our communities don't really change. You've got more dollar
right.
stores and check cashing stores, and you have diverse food options, or healthy dining options, or even different places for retail options. And so again, poverty level economic maintenance or gentrification displacement. Neither one of those things. And we know that when you have poverty level economic maintenance, you concentrate poverty. This is statistically, you concentrate poverty and you concentrate all of those things that advocates, our government, the nonprofit industrial complex often talks about, the issues that they want to exacerbate, that they want to alleviate, from low health outcomes, low educational attainment,
Right.
higher rates of poverty, bad policing, incarceration. Yet you concentrate poverty statistically. You keep adding those things together. So neither one of those developments, real estate, either gentrification / displacement or poverty level economic maintenance, those are the two kinds you see in neighborhoods like the South Bronx.
So
Neither one of them create the kind of balance and healthy communities that people want to stay in.
you took a look at Spofford many years ago and said, I see something other than a prison on this land. Do you think La Peninsula is a proper development and the kind of thing that will build the Bronx in the way you see it, or does it frustrate you?
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty much status quo development that that our city has been very comfortable doing in places like the South Bronx, where it's like you again, the continued concentration of poverty, very, very low income levels. So that's all that's being placed there. And there's not a whole lot of local economic development that's
You
that's
don't you so let's just say that they were to do it and make Bronx managers run those stores or own those stores or create the stores that would be, let's say, in the lobbies of those buildings of that development.
that'd be
That would
great.
be great. Oh,
That'd
but
be awesome.
you're not secure that that's going to happen. You
I'm not. I know that when we initially approached the Bloomberg administration with really identifying the 5 acres at the former Spofford site as a potential for the kind of transformational real estate development that we could do, in New York City, which could include things like mixed income housing, including supportive housing, opportunities for home ownership, as well as looking at what are the economic growth trajectories and really attracting the kind of businesses and creating support systems so there could be local economic developments there. And so those were the things that we were mostly focused on when I built the team to compete for it. Finally,
right.
what was interesting, we had more women and minority owned design teams that were a part of our proposal than we've
Well,
ever seen in
I,
a New York City
I
project.
don't want to run out of time. I'm thinking of Bruckner Boulevard. Is the Lit Bar and, let's say, Bronx native the kind of thing that you say, yes, this is locally owned,
Yeah, of
and
course. It's
And
exciting. It's great that there are local. I mean, I'm super excited whenever I hear of local people actually starting businesses and supporting their community through their own entrepreneurial development. And so the Lit Bar, run by Noel Santos, or a Bronx native, with Mr. Greon, is like those kind of places are the things that we want to see more.
Morris is who you
The
were
Book
talking
Down
about.
Grind,
Right.
we started it as a joint venture with a city-owned coffee shop called Birch Coffee, but we moved into our own 100% locally owned spot because we we wanted to just like be something that was super local, and then we created opportunities for local folks to invest in it as well. So
Boy, we don't have enough time here. Do you like La Centrale, which is going to have a YMCA and a Bronx Net Studios in its
I mean, I
basement?
wish that there were more opportunity. I wish that there was less status quo development that
Uh-huh.
was just sort of like, let's just build extremely low income housing, and create more opportunities for real local economic development and real job creation pieces.
And that's what your concern is the whole way. Thumbs up or thumbs down, or who knows what for the Brookfield properties in the South
You know
Bronx?
what? I don't know enough about it. I'd rather
Oh,
talk
okay,
about my
fair
own
enough. That's
stuff.
fair enough.
How's
That
that?
that is fair enough. Listen, the book is Reclaiming Your Community. I could show you the same thing that she's got behind her. It's just very, very interesting to me. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Right.
That was one of the phrases that I thought of, and I'm probably going to think of as I drive and move around the Bronx. Um, how do you avoid being on the menu? Because Bronxites have been saying, don't develop without us. We want to be there
Well,
in every one of our neighborhoods.
the only way we can do that is, one, acknowledge that there hasn't been enough local ownership opportunities, and actively go after them. We have to stop selling our property to predatory speculators, because many of us do that, and then they turn around, and these are not local landowners that are benefiting from generational wealth. My own family was one of those, and I talk about that within my book.
In the book, yes,
Yeah.
extensively.
So the other thing is like really creating more local opportunities for
Uh,
business development.
we're going to have to run the Cass Gilbert rail station building
Yes.
that you
Yes.
have. We're going to really see that. We're going to see a performance center. I don't have enough time, but that's what the plan is, and you own the building, and that's what you're working on.
Yes, we're transforming the old El Coche strip club building into a multi-purpose event hall and music, and really,
Uncle Gary will be invited when it opens.
it's already open. Like,
Oh,
we
okay.
actually do
So
TEDx.
then I got to get down there. All right, listen, Majora Carter, the book is Reclaiming Your Community. Thank you so much. We're going to have you back, or maybe on Bronx Talk, and really do a development show, because
Let's do that.
I got about pages more of questions for you. Thank you so much. Congratulations on the book, and everybody take a look forward, wherever books are sold, at the Lit Bar, Reclaiming Your Community, Majora Carter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that, my friends, will do it. What a stirring show about development and everything else. And I got to run. We'll see you next week.
All
Good
right.
night.